The room fell silent for a split second before laughter filled the air. It wasn't the warm kind of laughter that makes you feel included. It was sharp, mocking, and meant to put someone down. At the center of it all stood Jamal, the young son of a hard-working cleaning lady. His mother had been mopping floors and scrubbing tables in that very hotel for years, unnoticed by the wealthy guests who walked past her. But that night, her son was the one being noticed, and not for the reason anyone expected. It started when an Arab millionaire, known for his bold personality and love of showing off his success, casually struck up a conversation with the young man. He thought it would be a light-hearted moment, maybe a chance to show his wealth and intelligence in front of others. But when Jamal spoke up and mentioned with a calm confidence, "I speak 9 languages," the room erupted. The millionaire couldn't hold back his laughter. He leaned back, smirking, shaking his head as if the very idea was impossible. A cleaning lady's son, fluent in 9 languages. To him it was a joke too good not to laugh at. But here's the thing about people like Jamal. When life tries to keep them small, they quietly prepare to rise in ways no one expects. While others saw only his mother's uniform and tired hands, Jamal carried something they couldn't see. Discipline, knowledge, and a determination that had been burning in him since childhood. Growing up, he spent long hours sitting in the corner of the library his mother cleaned, soaking up books no one else bothered to pick up. He listened to tourists, to travelers, to hotel guests who came from every corner of the world, and he picked up their words like treasures. So when he said 9 languages, it wasn't arrogance, it was fact. Yet the Arab millionaire couldn't stop laughing. He thought Jamal was just another young man from the wrong side of life trying to impress the rich. What he didn't know was that the laughter would soon fade, replaced by shock, respect, and maybe even shame. Because what Jamal was about to do in that crowded hotel lounge would not only silence the room but also leave the millionaire questioning everything he thought he knew about people, privilege, and power. The tension grew thicker with every passing second. Guests leaned in, some amused, some curious. Jamal's mother stood frozen at the edge of the room, her mop in hand, eyes wide with worry. She had spent her life trying to protect her son from moments like this, moments where society's judgments cut deeper than words. But Jamal wasn't going to step back this time. He had something to prove, not just to the millionaire but to everyone watching. And then, with the weight of the whole room pressing down on him, Jamal opened his mouth again. What came next would flip the entire scene upside down. But before we get there, you need to ask yourself, what would a young man, armed with 9 languages and a lifetime of quiet strength, say in the face of laughter? The answer will leave you stunned. The room seemed to hold its breath as Jamal stood there, the echo of the millionaire's laughter still bouncing off the walls. He didn't flinch. Instead, he looked around at the guests. Men in sharp suits, women in elegant gowns, faces filled with curiosity and doubt. It wasn't the first time people had underestimated him. Growing up, that had been the story of his life. Yet this moment felt different. This wasn't just about him. It was about his mother, standing quietly at the edge of the room, her eyes full of both fear and pride. Jamal had learned early on that the world judged people by what they saw first. His mother's job, his skin color, his modest clothes. But behind that, there was a story few people knew. His mother, Amina, had left her homeland when Jamal was just a child. She had worked endless shifts as a cleaner in hotels, restaurants, and offices, sacrificing everything so her son could have opportunities she never had. Jamal remembered sitting in empty lobbies at night while his mother scrubbed floors, and instead of playing with toys, he read abandoned newspapers in different languages, trying to understand the words. Started as a game. He'd pick up a word from French here, a phrase from Spanish there, copying the sounds he heard from passing travelers. By the time he was 10, hotel staff from different countries were already joking that he could be their translator. By 12, he was helping lost tourists in the city, switching between English, Arabic, Italian, and more like it was second nature. His mother used to shake her head in disbelief, wondering how her boy could absorb so much, yet deep inside she knew it was his gift, and perhaps his way of breaking free from the limits life tried to place on them. But none of that mattered to the Arab millionaire sitting in front of him now. To men like him, the world was divided between those who had wealth and those who didn't. And in his eyes, Jamal belonged to the latter. The laughter wasn't just about doubting the claim, it was about putting someone in their place. The guests leaned closer, sensing a storm about to break, and Jamal could feel every stare on him. The young man straightened his shoulders, recalling all the nights he had whispered foreign words under his breath while helping his mother fold laundry. He thought about the books he had borrowed secretly from the library cart, books in Russian, Mandarin, German, languages most people considered too hard to master. For him, they were puzzles waiting to be solved. And now, here he was, standing in a hotel lounge full of powerful people, facing a man who thought knowledge and ability only belonged to the rich. The silence stretched on, broken only by the clink of a glass from the bar. Jamal glanced at his mother, her lips pressed tightly, her hands gripping the mop handle like it was her lifeline. He knew what she was thinking. Stay quiet, don't make trouble, just let it pass. But Jamal also knew this was his moment. If he backed down now, the laughter would win, and so would every stereotype that had followed them all their lives. So he took a breath, his heart beating fast but steady. He was ready to prove himself in a way that no one in the room would forget. What he was about to do would not only shock the millionaire but change the way everyone looked at him forever. And just as Jamal parted his lips to speak, the entire lounge leaned forward, waiting to hear what he would say next. Jamal didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm tone cut through the air sharper than the laughter that had mocked him minutes earlier. He began speaking, not in English, but in flawless French, his words flowing like music. For a moment, the guests blinked in confusion. Then, without pause, he shifted to Spanish, his accent rolling naturally as if he had grown up in Madrid. Before anyone could even process it, he turned to the German couple sitting near the bar and addressed them directly in their own language. Their jaws dropped, and the lounge grew quieter with each switch of his tongue. The Arab millionaire's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, but Jamal wasn't finished. He looked at the group of businessmen from East Asia who had been quietly observing, and with a respectful bow of his head, he greeted them in Mandarin, speaking with the ease of someone who had practiced for years. The businessmen exchanged astonished looks, nodding in recognition of his accuracy. The silence in the room grew heavier, but the tension didn't fade, it deepened. Everyone was stunned, but no one knew what was coming next. While the guests were mesmerized, Jamal's mother stood frozen, her emotions torn. She had always prayed her son's knowledge would open doors, but never imagined it would put him under such a spotlight. She knew that moments like this were dangerous. Wealthy men often didn't like being proven wrong, especially not by someone they considered beneath them. She wanted to step forward to pull Jamal back, but something inside her told her this was his fight to face. The millionaire tapped his fingers against his glass, the sound echoing like a warning. His pride had been bruised, and the room could feel his irritation boiling beneath the surface. To him, it wasn't just about languages anymore, it was about respect, authority, and control. He had come into this lounge as the center of attention, and now a cleaner's son had stolen it from him. That wasn't something he would allow easily. At another corner of the room, a different subplot was unfolding. A journalist, who had been covering the millionaire's latest business venture, sat quietly with her notepad. What began as a routine assignment was turning into a story she hadn't expected. She scribbled furiously, her eyes darting between Jamal and the millionaire. She knew conflict made headlines, and this was more than just an exchange of words. This was about class, privilege, and the power of knowledge. If she chose to publish what she witnessed tonight, it could spark a much larger conversation. Meanwhile, the guests whispered among themselves, each with their own perspective. Some admired Jamal's courage, secretly cheering for him. Others, tied to the millionaire through business or favors, watched with unease, knowing siding with the young man could come at a cost. The tension in the room wasn't just about what Jamal had said, it was about what it meant. His presence was challenging the order everyone had quietly accepted. Jamal noticed the shifting energy, but his focus stayed on the man before him. His heart pounded, but his gaze was steady. He had revealed just a fraction of what he could do, but he knew the real test wasn't proving his knowledge. It was enduring the backlash that would come from humiliating a powerful man in public. The millionaire finally spoke, his voice lower now, but laced with sharpness. "Parlor tricks," he muttered, as though dismissing what he had just witnessed. Yet the flicker in his eyes betrayed something else, unease, maybe even fear. The guests sensed it too, and that uncertainty made the room feel like a storm was about to break. Jamal's mother gripped her mop tighter, her knuckles white. The journalist leaned closer, her pen ready. And Jamal, standing tall in the center of it all, prepared himself for what was coming next. Because this was no longer just about languages. It was about dignity, pride, and the clash between a world of wealth and a boy who refused to bow down. The air in the lounge had grown heavy, almost suffocating. No one dared move too quickly, afraid to break the fragile silence that held them all. Jamal stood steady, his face calm but his mind racing. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on him, testing his resolve. The Arab millionaire's laughter had stopped, but the danger hadn't faded. It had only transformed into something sharper, more unpredictable. The millionaire leaned forward, his expression unreadable, though his pride burned just beneath the surface. "So you can speak like a parrot," he said, his tone clipped and cold. "But words mean nothing without power." The guests shifted in their seats, some nodding cautiously, others frowning. His statement wasn't just about Jamal. It was a reminder to everyone present of where real control usually lay. Yet Jamal didn't flinch. His whole life he had heard versions of the same message. Stay in your place, know your limits. And his whole life, he had quietly refused to listen. The journalist in the corner tightened her grip on her pen. She could see where this was heading, and the tension made her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a moment that revealed raw truths about society, about privilege and resilience. The thought of publishing it both thrilled and terrified her. She knew if the millionaire felt humiliated, he could destroy reputations with a single word. But if Jamal continued to rise above it, the narrative would shift entirely. Guests began to whisper more openly now. A few murmured admiration for Jamal's boldness. Others muttered that he was crossing a dangerous line. Every word spoken only added to the mounting pressure. Jamal's mother could hardly breathe, torn between the instinct to shield her son and the realization that stepping in might crush his courage. She had always told him knowledge was his strength, but she had never imagined it would bring him face to face with a man who could ruin everything with a single gesture. The millionaire's voice grew louder, almost taunting. 9 languages, yet you stand here with nothing. Tell me, what good is all your knowledge if you cannot rise above your mother's work? If you cannot step into this world as an equal? His words carried a sting, and the crowd reacted. Some gasped, some looked away, uncomfortable with the cruelty. Jamal, however, stayed rooted. His eyes locked on the man before him. Inside he felt a storm, but outside he gave nothing away. Then, in a sudden twist, one of the businessmen from the far corner rose from his seat. He had been silent until now, but his interest was clear. He addressed Jamal in flawless Italian, testing him in front of everyone. Without hesitation, Jamal responded. His accent smooth, his words precise. The businessman's eyes widened with approval, and the crowd stirred. This wasn't just a claim anymore. This was proof, undeniable and powerful. The millionaire's hand tightened around his glass, his knuckles pale. The more Jamal spoke, the more control slipped from his grasp. The whispers grew louder, the journalist scribbled faster, and Jamal's mother's eyes filled with tears she fought to hold back. Every second stretched like an eternity, the air charged with the promise of something irreversible about to happen. Jamal's voice carried steady, breaking into yet another language, this time one few in the room understood. The rhythm and sound of it seemed to wrap around the guests like a spell, silencing even the whispers. The lounge felt like it was teetering on the edge of a cliff, every soul leaning forward, waiting to see what the next step would be. And then the millionaire stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound made hearts pound faster. His eyes locked on Jamal, no longer laughing, no longer dismissive, but cold, calculating. Whatever came next would decide everything. For Jamal, for his mother, and for everyone watching. The moment before the storm had arrived, and the room braced for the clash that was now inevitable. The millionaire's chair scraped back into place with a sound that made everyone in the lounge flinch. He stood tall, his gaze fixed on Jamal like a spotlight that burned hotter with every second. The air was thick with tension, but just when it seemed the confrontation had reached its limit, the door to the lounge swung open. A group of new guests entered, diplomats and business partners from abroad, important figures who were scheduled to meet the millionaire that evening. Their sudden arrival shifted the atmosphere instantly, and all eyes darted between them and the scene unfolding in the center of the room. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps better. Among the new arrivals was a foreign ambassador, a man known for his commanding presence and sharp intellect. He took in the scene with a quick glance, noting Jamal, the furious millionaire, and the hushed crowd. Without waiting for an explanation, the ambassador greeted the room in his native language, a rare dialect that few outsiders could speak. He directed it casually at the millionaire, expecting no one else to respond. But before the millionaire could open his mouth, Jamal answered. The words slipped out smoothly, confidently, and with such authenticity that the ambassador froze mid-step. The entire room turned toward Jamal in shock. What had been a tense display between a young man and a wealthy elite had now escalated into something far bigger. Jamal hadn't just impressed tourists or businessmen. He had caught the attention of one of the most powerful voices in the room. The millionaire's jaw tightened. His power, already shaken, was slipping further out of reach with every second Jamal spoke. And now it wasn't just about laughter or pride. It was about influence. The ambassador's eyes lit up with interest, studying Jamal with curiosity and growing admiration. "Remarkable," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for others to hear. The crowd stirred again, whispers swelling like waves. Jamal's mother felt her knees weaken. She had spent years keeping her head down, making herself invisible in places like this. And now her son was not only standing in the spotlight but challenging the very hierarchy she had always feared. She wanted to be proud, but she was terrified of what might follow. Powerful men did not like being embarrassed in public, and the millionaire was not the kind to forgive and forget. The journalist in the corner sensed the shift instantly. This was no longer just a personal exchange. It was becoming a story with international weight. She scribbled faster, her heart racing as she realized the headline would no longer just be about a millionaire mocking a cleaner's son. This was about a young man who could bridge cultures in ways that even world leaders struggled to do. The stakes had skyrocketed, and the room knew it. The millionaire finally spoke again, but this time his voice was sharper, colder. "Enough," he said, his tone carrying the edge of authority, but also the fragility of a man whose control was slipping. "You've made your point, but let's not mistake tricks for true worth." His words hung in the air, but they didn't land with the force he intended. Too many people had already seen what Jamal could do, and doubt was spreading like wildfire. Still, danger lingered. The millionaire's pride was wounded, and that made him unpredictable. With the ambassador's attention now fixed on Jamal, the tension deepened into something darker. Because the more valuable Jamal appeared to others, the more the millionaire would fight to keep control of the narrative. And as Jamal stood silently, his steady eyes locked on the man before him, everyone in the room could feel it. The real battle hadn't even begun yet. The lounge felt like it was trembling under the weight of everything unsaid. The millionaire stood rigid, his authority cracking with every passing moment, while Jamal stood unshaken, his calm presence commanding more respect than wealth ever could. The ambassador broke the silence first, turning to Jamal with a measured smile. "Young man," he said, "tell me, how many languages do you truly speak?" Jamal met his gaze without hesitation. "9," he answered simply, his voice steady. And then, with a quiet confidence, he began to weave them together. He greeted the ambassador in his dialect again, then slipped seamlessly into French, Italian, and Arabic, moving between languages with ease as if he were painting with words. The crowd leaned closer, their eyes widening with every phrase. By the time he switched to Mandarin and German, there was no doubt left. This was no trick. It was real. The ambassador's face lit up with admiration. He turned to the guests and declared, "This young man has a gift, one that few in the world possess." The room erupted in murmurs, many nodding in agreement, their earlier doubt erased. The millionaire's attempt to humiliate Jamal had backfired spectacularly. What was meant to be a moment of laughter had turned into a showcase of brilliance. The journalist's pen couldn't keep up with the scene unfolding before her. She knew this would be more than a headline. It would be a story that traveled far beyond the walls of the hotel. And Jamal's mother, standing frozen near the back, felt tears welling up. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. Her son had given her a voice without saying her name. But just as the room seemed ready to crown Jamal the victor, the millionaire struck back with one last move. He raised his glass, his voice calm but icy. "Impressive," he admitted, though his tone dripped with bitterness. "But tell me this, Jamal. Languages may impress a crowd, but do they put food on the table? Do they change your place in life? Or will you still return home tonight to the same struggles?" His words sliced through the air, and for a moment the silence returned. Jamal felt the sting, but he didn't falter. Instead he turned, his eyes resting on his mother. With a small smile he spoke, not in any of the 9 languages but in plain, simple English. "My place in life isn't decided by where I start, but by what I carry with me. And what I carry can never be taken away." His words rang out with a weight that silenced even the whispers. The ambassador nodded, impressed. Guests exchanged glances, recognizing that the millionaire's power had been broken, not by wealth but by wisdom. And then came the twist no one expected. The ambassador stepped forward and placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "I came here tonight looking for someone who could bridge worlds in my new cultural program," he announced. "And I believe I've found him." Gasps filled the room as Jamal's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't spoken tonight to gain anything, yet opportunity had come to him in the most unexpected way. The millionaire's face drained of color. In trying to belittle the son of a cleaning lady, he had only elevated him higher than he ever imagined. The room buzzed with energy, the guests realizing they had witnessed a turning point, not just for Jamal, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. And as Jamal stood in the center of the room, his mother's tears now flowing freely, he realized something powerful. The laughter that once tried to silence him had only amplified his voice. What began as a moment of mockery had ended with respect, and a future that no one, not even the millionaire, could have foreseen. The lounge slowly settled after the ambassador's announcement, though the energy in the room still pulsed with disbelief and awe. Jamal stood there, his hands trembling slightly now that the intensity of the moment had passed. For so long he had carried the weight of silence, of being overlooked, of watching his mother bend her back while the world barely noticed her. And now, in the span of one evening, he had not only found his voice but forced others to listen. His mother finally stepped forward, her mop still in her hands. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him with tearful eyes, the kind of look that said everything words couldn't. Jamal gently took the mop from her and set it aside, as if to say her work, at least for tonight, was done. For the first time in her life, she wasn't standing in the shadows. She was standing beside her son, who had shown the world that dignity and brilliance could come from anywhere. The ambassador spoke again, his voice carrying authority. "Gifts like this should not be hidden. They should be shared, celebrated, and nurtured." His words carried across the lounge, drawing nods from guests who had once doubted Jamal. Even the businessman who had tested him earlier walked over and extended his hand, a gesture of respect that Jamal accepted with quiet grace. The journalist closed her notebook, her expression glowing with the thrill of a story she knew would spark conversation far beyond these walls. For her, the evening was no longer about covering a wealthy man's venture. It had become about telling the story of a boy who defied every expectation. She knew the world needed to hear it, not just as entertainment, but as a lesson in humility, resilience, and the hidden brilliance often overlooked in everyday lives. As for the millionaire, he remained standing, his pride shattered. He didn't say another word. The silence around him was more powerful than anything he could argue. His influence in the room had slipped through his fingers, and every guest knew it. He left quietly, his retreat unnoticed by most, because all eyes remained fixed on Jamal and the promise of what his future now held. Later that night, when the crowd had gone and the noise had faded, Jamal walked his mother home. The air was cool, and for the first time they walked without feeling invisible. His mother finally broke the silence. "I never wanted you to feel the weight I carried," she said softly. Jamal shook his head. "Your strength gave me mine," he answered. It wasn't about languages or recognition. It was about the legacy of sacrifice, the quiet power of resilience passed down from one generation to the next. The story spread quickly in the days that followed. Guests retold what they had seen, the journalist's article circulated widely, and soon Jamal became known not as the son of a cleaning lady, but as the young man who spoke 9 languages and silenced a millionaire with wisdom. Opportunities began to appear. Doors that had always seemed locked now stood open. But at the heart of it all, Jamal remained the same. He never forgot the nights in the library corners, the sound of his mother's mop swishing across the floor, or the sting of being laughed at. Those memories weren't chains anymore. They were reminders of how far he had come. In the end, the lesson wasn't about wealth or power. It was about seeing beyond appearances, about recognizing that brilliance can come from the most unexpected places. Jamal's story became a reminder that respect is not earned through titles or money, but through courage, knowledge, and the unshakable belief that no one's worth should ever be measured by where they come from. And so, the boy who once sat quietly with books while his mother cleaned walked into a future filled with possibility, carrying with him the unbreakable truth that voices born in the shadows can one day light up the entire room.